Bernard Maybeck practiced as an architect in the San Francisco Bay Area beginning in the 1890s. 2 decades later, he designed this, the Palace of Fine Arts, for the 1915 Pan-Pacific Exposition. This episode of Here looks at the 5 San Francisco houses he designed in the decade between the 1906 earthquake and the exposition.
I've come to think about Maybeck as an architect who practiced with a gleam in his eyes and perhaps a wink. The more I dig into his work, the more I realize that his architecture was the building of material structures that embodied myths of the occupation of landscapes. When I look at photographs of him, I do not see a glimmer in his face. I see depth and a Germanic sternness. It's really in his surroundings in these photographs that there is a hint of gleam. In the published photographs, he surrounds himself in what can only be seen as a hobbit's existence, a costumed family life, a living in a mythic cabin on the land. Here was an architect who practiced when the Bay Area was not developed, when much of the urban fabric of its towns was still open sand dunes or forested hillsides. His work presents an understanding of site and human occupation that was quietly profound. When carefully looked at now, a century later, his work speaks to a profound understanding of land and human shelter. In December of 2008, I spent an afternoon visiting the 5 houses that Maybeck designed and built in San Francisco.
As you get within a block or two of any of these San Francisco Maybeck houses, they do not stand out. They do not make special statements at that scale. They are good neighbors and dissolve into the urban fabric that used to and now surrounds them. This is no mean trick. These 5 houses are located in quite different neighborhoods and correspondingly are quite different from each other. During the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire, the E.B. Powers family took refuge atop this peak known as Buena Vista Park. After the earthquake, E.B. Powers became Assistant Attorney General of the state of California, and he hired Bernard Maybeck to design a new home on Buena Vista's southwestern slope at Masonic Avenue and Piedmont.
As you approach this 1910 home along the main thoroughfare on which it's located, you cannot make out its overall form. From 1 or 2 blocks away, you do not expect a home that is fundamentally different from its neighbors. In fact, it is only within 1 or 2 homes away that if you look carefully, you will see a home that is dark, made of wood, stark, and in contrast with the painted and stucco homes all around it. And if you look even closer, and this you cannot do if you are driving, by the way, you will notice that the house itself presents itself as a cottage somehow set shoulder to shoulder with the homes that are standard bay-windowed painted Victorians from the 1890s and modern stucco homes from the 1920s onward. Instead of a gabled roof perpendicular to the street or a flat roof, both of which characterize its neighbors, this house sets its gable roof parallel to the street, which means that it presents an extended downward swooping roof eave to the street. Look upward and you can make out a chimney, dormers, and a porch that asymmetrically break through the long swooping line of roof. Large glass windows and doors are located asymmetrically at the northern end of the home, which is an area where the house centers on the small downward side street, Piedmont, and hence opens the house to unimpeded distant views of San Francisco hills. Look even more carefully and you see the undersides of the roofs, in which pairs of delicate thin roof rafters project the roof out beyond its walls. The ends of these thin roof rafters reveal themselves as squares that hold up and lie below delightfully rounded roof eave gutters. In most homes, these elements are scaleless or thick without a lightness of detail. In a Maybeck home, these minor elements are visual delights, details that emerge out of the construction of the house as gifts to the street. Look at the post that you see as you mount the stairs to the front door. When this post rises to the roof eave, it receives its own small gable cap, a marvelous eccentric touch. Taking all this in, if we step back and look at the house, it hints that its main roof completes at the other side of the house, in the rear yard. With smoke puffing out of its chimney, it evokes the image of a small wooden cottage on a hillside, a very poignant European country-based image of hearth and home, though here set in a dense hillside urban city. If the Masonic Avenue home requires you to stop and look closely to understand its exterior, Maybeck's house on Sotelo Avenue offers an easier view for the passerby. It was built 3 years after the Masonic Avenue home in 1913 and is one of the first homes completed in the fashionable Forest Hills neighborhood developed by Berkeley realtors Mason and McDuffie. Knowing the Masonic Avenue home, the Sotelo home looks familiar. Here, too, is a cottage with a prominent gabled roof set parallel to the street. But here, rather than being presented with only fragments of a larger, more concealed gabled roof cottage, Sotelo appears as a completely formed tiny cottage. Gone is the reference to a mythic primordial wood shingle form rising out of the fog and sitting mysteriously on the hillside on Masonic Avenue. Instead, Sotelo shows its symmetry in its centered large windows and small overhead trellises and strangely canted upper-level gabled ends. Against this almost formal composition of this cottage sits a curious octagonal corner balcony raised on a pedestal off the ground. A bunkered garage cuts into the home on either side as a staircase ascends to an outside terrace surrounded by a continuous wooden planter box, also held up on curious concrete posts. As in the Masonic Avenue home, the front of the house sets up an expectation that what you see must be what is beyond. Yet here, as you peer to what is beyond, you see that the stairs to the left of the house lead to a south-facing terrace that is both the entrance to the home and the place where the home's ground level spills out into its garden. And you come to see that the tiny cottage at front is but the living room. It's treated as the front of a collection of roof forms, as if the house evolved over a long period of time, a little addition by little addition. Along the north side of the home, large windows look towards the distant hills and the Golden Gate Bridge.
In 1916, 3 years after Sotelo, Maybeck's house for Dr. and Mrs. Erlanger was completed at the corner of Castaneda and Lopez, also in the Forest Hills development. It is shrouded by landscaping and suggests that something special lies within, beckoning the visitors. Like the other Maybeck houses, this one does not intrude on your view, and once you take notice of it and start to explore it, magic seems to erupt out of it. A large gable roof lays over large expanses of small paned glass windows that suggest that something both very intimate and breathtaking lies within. One can feel the bays of the house opening out to the landscape, with trellises reaching out. Within this roof lies a magnificent living room, now often the site for wonderful music celebrations. And up above, you can sense that this roof is surmounted by yet another taller, yet narrower part of the house that looms upward just in back. Go around to the south side of the house, and that taller element presents itself topped by its own gable room, with an asymmetrical assortment of dormers, lower rectilinear elements, and a strange octagonal glass bay sitting atop a brick cube, all gathered below it. It turns out that the octagonal appendage is the entrance to the house, facing out into a south-facing garden, set behind street foliage. Looking closely at the details of this octagon, I am left speechless. Compared to the three simple windows of the roof dormer bedrooms above, the base of the octagon is an explosion of large, elaborate moldings. Sensual rounded courses with large flat dams play against the scalloped ogee courses. Rounded moldings are carefully offset from the adjoining brickwork. These outrageous moldings run headlong into and disappear through the brick, only to reappear on the other side of the brick. So the top corners of the brick appear as wedges. As in the other Maybeck homes, a main building form serves as a foil for a number of smaller elements that erupt out of it or are appended to it from almost whimsical positions. A marvelous asymmetric composition. Maybeck's two other San Francisco houses are in Presidio Heights. Both were built in 1909, before the homes we have already looked at. The house on Pacific Avenue near Presidio is a townhouse that is packed tightly together with its neighbors, all of them facing northward. Some of these were designed by architects Willis Pope and Ernest Coxhead. Together they form a collection of homes that have similar materials, dark wood trim, wood shingles, yet differ from each other in their architectural details. As you approach the Maybeck home, it simply does not stand out. And it is only when you turn and face the house that you realize that something is very strange and marvelous here. The houses on either side of it are built out to the sidewalk, as with most San Francisco homes, thus maximizing their interior space. The Maybeck home is not. It has a front entry built out to the sidewalk, but the bulk of its mass lays in back. The detailing on this house is quite different from anything nearby, perhaps quite different from anything else in San Francisco, or for that matter, maybe in California. The trims on the face of the roof eaves are exaggerated in their vertical thickness, sensual in their rounds and ogies, and bizarre in raised eyebrow treatments over the upper windows. As in the Masonic Street house, a small gable crowns the entryways. The basic symmetry of the front tall mass is broken by highly asymmetric placements of the front door, the chimney, the dormer, different-sized windows, and a marvelous twisted copper rainwater leader. Three blocks to the west of the Pacific Avenue house lies Maybeck's largest San Francisco house, built in 1909 for the Roost family at Jackson and Locust Streets.
And like all Maybecks, seems to fit with its neighbors, appearing even a bit smaller than they. As with the other Maybecks, smaller lower elements are tight to the street and stand off against a larger mass of the home, which is set back from the building's perimeter. In this house, the details are strange on several levels. First, the Tudor batten against stucco infill stands out in stark contrast with its neighbors. A down-swooping second-story element juts outward towards the street, yet is split in two with a quad-foil decorated balcony, as if it were the stage for an important speech or benediction. Overhead, buttresses and column caps carry rectangular open wooden friezes that in turn hold up the projecting eaves of this swooping roof. This entire element houses the master bedroom's dressing room and bathroom. The author Sally Woodbridge pointed out that Maybeck was selected by the original Mrs. Bruce as she liked the theatricality of his homes. One wonders what it might have meant to have been able to step out onto this balcony, freshly bathed and dressed, on one's way to the opera. These elements sit asymmetrically composed against the main roof that looms above. The formal dining room, with its diamond-leaded glass windows, sits immediately below on the main floor. The extended entry leads from the street corner of the house past this dining room to the home's main entrance, through a loggia set on pillars and protected overhead by the master bedroom on the floor above. Flower boxes are set between the pillars of the entry loggia, held on pairs of stanchions set off by centered circular drainage pipes. Diamond-shaped 4-foot-high box columns hold the upper floor's flower boxes, while buttresses and rectangular friezes carry the roof eaves. Whereas the Main Street portion of the house reads like a low two-story structure with wide overhanging roofs with steep roof behind, the downhill portion of the house has a clearly vertical grand aspect. It reads as a many-storied mini-castle complete with large fireplace and a chimney and a steep, tall roof. As this is a very generous home, these exterior surprises refer to others within. It is hard to realize that between the front and the rear portions of the house lies a small outdoor roof court open to the sky, containing a skylight bringing sunlight down to the main floor, right where a visitor stands when he or she has finally gained entry to the home's interior. The visitor has been waiting in relative darkness for the pair of entry doors to open, having traveled down the increasingly dark exterior entry loggia.
Although the house appears to be a collision of two forms, the low street elements and the vertical rear form, the house on the inside is organized around a central axis that stretches from the south-facing dining room under the master bedroom balcony, through a formal dining room, out into a tall, formal living room, out through a small sitting area, out through a wonderful picture window, and going to the outside, out across the Presidio, and northward to the Golden Gate. In San Francisco, the planning review process is set up to ensure that San Francisco's housing stock is not compromised by seemingly out-of-place buildings. The city is divided into 4 quadrants in the planning department, with 3 of them having rules to control how a home can deviate or not in form and details from its neighbors. Yet in many ways, these Maybeck homes deviate in both form and detail from their neighbors, yet are good neighbors and enhance their surroundings. Whereas most San Francisco homes are clones of their adjoining neighbors, each of these Maybeck homes is unique unto itself. It is important to understand that these homes were designed in an era when the city's neighborhoods were less self-conscious stylistically. These Maybeck homes were among the first homes on their blocks. Maybeck's San Francisco homes are exercises in architectural character. They do not copy their neighbors, but create their own miniature architectural worlds. Yet each of these homes is aware of its surroundings in a way that is deeper than if it conformed to or did not conform to its adjoining homes. Underlying these 5 homes is a fundamental authenticity that each has. Each home defines its own world, has its own set of details. These Maybeck homes are aware of the land on which they sit. They are aware of how that land rises or falls. They are aware of where they have views and where they do not have views. They are aware of where the sun moves from and to, and hence the houses know how the sun can animate its interior. They are aware of how to present themselves to make an interesting streetscape, and where they need to shield that interior from the street. All in all, these houses are of and reflect the circumstances of their site. All of these homes are homes of wood, both inside and outside. The forms you see at the front of these homes carry on to the overall form of the home. They do not have Victorian false fronts, fancy front facades that have been pasted onto a basic box, a condition found all over San Francisco. The main rooms are located where the home's views are, not necessarily where the street is. Needless to say, these were not the least expensive homes to build. They are not driven by trying to get the maximum amount of interior square footage out of their site, but rather they give up developable front and side volume in order to create gardens, urban streetscape loggias, porches, and a play of architectural forms. These Maybeck homes are not concerned with neighborhood precedent, but rather with personal authenticity. These homes have not been created from the outside in or from a desire to extend the uniformity of a neighborhood. They are not concerned with similarity of detail, but rather with the invention of detail. Maybe it is the authenticity that makes these Maybeck homes seem so alive and real, though they are over 100 years old. In contrast, many of their neighbors feel like pasted up copies of homes you know from somewhere else in San Francisco that have been gerrymandered to fit their sites.